Ella had just moved into her new apartment, a cozy little place on the top floor of an old building downtown. The rent was cheap, and the view of the city was breathtaking. The only downside was the strange stories she'd heard from the previous tenants, but Ella wasn't one to believe in ghost tales. Her first night was quiet, the hum of the city below lulling her to sleep. But as the clock struck midnight, she was awakened by a faint sound. It was like a whisper, soft and unintelligible. Ella sat up in bed, straining her ears, but the noise stopped, leaving her to think it was just her imagination. The next night, the whispering returned, louder this time. It seemed to come from the walls themselves, a low, constant murmur that filled the room. Ella couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unsettling, almost angry. She tried to ignore it, telling herself it was just the old pipes creaking in the walls. But the whispers grew louder and more persistent each night. They seemed to follow her from room to room, growing more distinct. She could almost make out the words now, something about leave and danger. On the fifth night, Ella couldn't take it anymore. She got out of bed, determined to find the source of the noise. She pressed her ear to the wall, and the whispers suddenly stopped. A cold breeze swept through the room, even though all the windows were closed. Then, the wall she was leaning against felt different, softer, almost as if it were pulsing. She stepped back in horror as the wallpaper began to peel away on its own, revealing a hidden door she had never noticed before. Terrified but curious, Ella opened the door. Inside was a small, dark room, empty except for a single tattered chair in the center. On the floor around the chair were deep scratches, as if someone had been dragged across the floor. The air was heavy with a musty metallic smell that made her gag. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her and the whispers returned, deafening this time. The walls of the small room began to close in, the whispers turning into screams. She pounded on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panicking, Ella fumbled for her phone, trying to call for help, but there was no signal. The room grew smaller, the screams louder, until she felt like her head would explode. Then, as quickly as it started, everything went silent. The door creaked open, and Ella stumbled out, gasping for air. The apartment was completely silent. The strange room was gone, replaced by the same wall as before, but now it was covered in fresh scratches, and the floor was smeared with what looked like blood. Ella didn't stay to find out more. She grabbed her things and fled the apartment that night, leaving everything behind. The next morning, when the landlord came to check on the place, it was empty. There were no signs of Ella, no scratches, no blood, just the apartment, as if nothing had ever happened. But from that day on, no one else stayed in the apartment for long. The whispers always returned, and those who stayed long enough swore they heard Ella's voice among them, begging to be let out.